There we go. Give folks a second to jump on here. I apologize for the technical difficulties there. For some reason, I set it up and then I went to do it and it had yesterday's on there. So not sure what was going on there. But yeah, we'll just give it a minute to let people jump on here. And then we'll get going. Just throw a little message in there real quick. All right, I think we've given ample enough time here. So we will go ahead and get it going. All right, so first just want to mention you can ask your questions at any time, 24/7. And you can ask your questions that can either be below the video if you're on a smaller screen like a phone. If you're on a larger screen like you're on your computer, something like that, it should be to the right of the video. And you can ask your question at any time, 24/7, and will be answered during the next live office hours. You do not have to wait until the office hours starts to ask your question. Also want to mention that if you're unable to make it to see the answer to your question, that's okay. I do recommend that you do attend the office hours live if you ask a question, just in case you have a follow-up question, or maybe I have follow-up questions to be able to help you. That way we can communicate in real time, but no worries if you're out playing some golf or something like that, got something better to do, whatever it is, no worries. If you want to see the answer to your question, you can go to the archived office hours after office hours are concluded, and you can see the answer to your question there. To access the archived office hours, you can click the green button there below the video to take you there. You can find yesterday's on there and all the other ones before that. Also wanted to note that I do offer online lessons if you're interested in working with me one-on-one and getting down to figure out exactly what you want to do. You want to cut through, make sure that you're working on the right things and on the right path to improvement. Feel free to join up with me. I'd love to have the opportunity to work with you. If you're interested in that, there should be a link above the video here to sign up for my online lessons. If I don't have spots available, I'm not sure if I have spots available right now, but if I don't have spots available, no worries, just join that waiting list. And then whenever spots become available, whenever I open up spots, we'll send an email out to everyone on the waiting list before we let everybody else know, to give you a little heads up, opportunity to sign up before we let the masses know. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started here. Let me get to my screen. Okay, so let's see here. So that was yesterday. That was Chris. All right, so Gafron says, "Hi, Cube. Any difference in technique in chipping with 8-iron pitching wedge versus sand wedge, lob wedge, gap wedge around the green?" It just depends on the kind of shot that you're trying to hit. If you're trying to hit like a bump and run kind of shot, which is really what you're going to be hitting with an 8-iron, it's going to be basically the same. You may not need to put the ball as far back in your stance. So if you have more loft, like you have like a lob wedge or sand wedge or something like that, 60 degrees, 56 degrees of loft, in order to hit that kind of bump and run shot, you may need to have the ball a little bit more back in your stance to lower the loft a little bit. And with an 8-iron, you wouldn't necessarily need to do that because it already doesn't have a lot of loft. So you could kind of play that more in the middle of your stance and get a similar result. But it really just depends on the kind of chip that you're trying to hit. If you're trying to hit a high and soft chip, You're not really going to be able to hit that with an 8-iron or really even a pitching wedge. Pitching wedge probably doesn't have enough loft to do that. So it's a different kind of chip. So for example, let's just I'm not going to switch clubs every time because I just don't have a whole plethora of clubs in here. But let's say that I'm chipping with an 8-iron. It's basically it's pretty much only really one shot you're really going to hit with like an 8-iron or even like a pitching wedge, and that's going to be more like a bump and run kind of shot. So that's going to be feet fairly close together, ball position roughly about the middle of the stance, maybe a little bit back of middle, right? Weight forward, hands a little bit forward, and then I'm keeping my weight forward, and I'm just turning my chest back and through, and just trying to make good contact, get that ball rolling. So if I do that with a lob wedge, or even like a 56 degree, if I do that exact same setup, you may not get you're not going to get a bump and run really kind of shot for the most part, unless it's like a shorter shot. If it's a kind of a longer chip, if it's a really short chip, like I'm only chipping the ball, 10 feet or something like that. You have really firm and fast greens. Yeah, it's going to be pretty much like a bump and run. You can do it exactly like that. But if I'm chipping this ball, let's say I'm chipping it 10 yards, right? That's how far I need to hit it to get the ball to go where I need to go with a lob wedge. Because I'm hitting it harder and with some more loft, it's going to end up having some spin on it, and it's going to have a little check on it. So it's going to be a little different kind of, it might be the same exact technique that you're using, but you're going to get a different result because it's a different club. So if I wanted to hit more of a bump and run type of shot with like a lob wedge, I would put the ball more kind of off my back toe, weight more forward, hands more forward, right? And I'd be hitting it kind of like that. And that would kind of produce more of that lower lofted, kind of more bump and run kind of shot. Now, if I was hitting a chip, I want to hit a higher, softer one. I wouldn't hit an 8-iron. I would hit a lob wedge. I'd have the face more open, ball a little bit forward, right? And then I would really try to get the club underneath it and get a little bit more loft and spin out of it. But that really just depends on what I'm trying to do. All right, let's get going here. So Guffron, another question says, how to hit power fade with irons. So really, let's understand that a little bit, because my opinion is a lot of people say, I've heard a lot of people say, oh, power fade, power fade, power fade. There isn't a true definition of what a power fade is that I know of anyway. I'll tell you what I kind of think what a power fade is, and hopefully it makes sense to you. But generally, when you hit a fade, it's going to be a weaker shot, because when you hit a fade, what has to happen to hit a fade is the face has to be open to the path of the club. And when the face is open, it adds loft, right? And when you add loft, you're going to get a weaker shot. So generally speaking, your fades are going to be weaker. So, but I've seen lots of people just hit a fade and really they just hit it solid and they call it a power fade. And that's not really what I would call a power fade. What I would define as a power fade is a fade that doesn't lose any power, right? There's no power lost from hitting the fade, right? Because by nature, fades are going to be weaker. Like all things equal, fades are going to be equal or weaker, because you're opening the face, and opening the face adds loft. So when you hit a power fade, I would say in order to do that, you have to get more shaft lean with that fade to make up for the loft that you're adding by opening the face to hit the fade. That's what I would call a power fade. And that's whether you are hitting an iron or whether you're hitting a driver or whatever. So as far as how you hit that, it's really just about getting more shaft lean. Now, if that is not something that you can really do very well, like if you're someone who already struggles with getting shaft lean, a power fade's probably not in the cards for you. It's probably not something that you're going to hit. And I'm okay with you just hitting a fade and hitting it solid and calling it a power fade. That's fine. That's not what I would call a power fade. I would call a power fade is a fade where you get more shaft lean to make up for the loft that is lost by opening up the face. So as far as how to do that, it's not, I wish it was something I could just say, oh, you just do this and you're going to hit a power fade, but it involves getting more shaft lean. So what I would say is, first, to hit a power fade or to get the hands more ahead of the ball, you can't have the ball position more forward. A lot of people put the ball position more forward in the stance to hit a fade. And the reason why people will do that, I get why people do that. The reason why is because it helps to get the path more out to in, which is what you need. You need a path that's out to in relative to the target to get a fade. So if you put the ball position more forward, it makes it easier to get the path more out to in. The problem with that is it makes it more difficult to get the hands ahead, and you're going to tend to lose more power. So I don't like to put the ball position more forward in my stance as a way to hit a fade, unless I'm trying to hit it higher or something like that. But if I'm trying to hit a fade where I don't really have any loss of power, like it's equal to my draw, essentially, then I'm not going to put the ball forward in my stance. If anything, I'm going to put the ball maybe even slightly more back in my stance. So if I'm hitting this is kind of the way that I hit a fade, and basically this is the way that I hit a fade to ensure kind of minimal loss compared to a draw, minimal distance loss or no distance loss at all compared to a draw, is I'm going to have the ball position in the same place. But in order to get my path out to in relative to the target, I'm going to change my alignment. I'm going to align my body more to the left. And that's going to get my path working more to the left. If I make this swing and that's a draw, and then I go here and I aim my body more to the left, well, it would still be, if I don't change anything, it's still going to be a draw that just starts left and draws more to the left. But the idea here is I want to get my path to the left. Now I need to get my face more open so that way I can fade it. So what I typically do to hit that fade is I try to feel like I'm rotating more and I'm holding that face and I'm getting my hands ahead more to hold that face open, right? So I'm not releasing it and throwing it to close it. I'm leaving that open, but I'm having my hands more ahead to help me to keep that shaft lean on there. So my normal shot is kind of a draw, swing from the inside, a little bit close to the path there with my face. Now to hit the fade, I'm going to aim a little bit more to the left, and I'm going to really feel like I rotate more, have my hands ahead, but I'm holding that face through contact to help me to kind of get that get that fade going. So that's really how I would hit a fade. But really, to hit a power fade, in my opinion, is a fade, like I said, that doesn't have any loft added by virtue of opening the face. You're keeping the face de-lofted while still having it open. So from face on, it might look like this, where normally I might come into contact like that for a draw, and then if I'm hitting a fade, I might be more like that, where you can see this. I'm exaggerating for effect here, but you can see how that face is open, but my hands are more ahead. But that keeps it doesn't add more loft to the face because I'm making up for it by getting my hands more ahead. So I would say a power fade, like a true power fade, in my opinion, is more of an advanced shot. You have to be able to get a lot of shaft lean, and most people just aren't able to do that. Now, I will say it's shaft lean relative to you, right? So for you, I'm not saying you specifically, but just anybody, if you're coming into contact and you're normally like this, where it's not a ton of shaft lean, and keep in mind, if you've been on the office hours before and you listen to me talk about this stuff, you probably know that I don't believe that everyone needs to have crazy amounts of shaft lean. As long as you have some shaft lean, you're going to be able to hit good shots. So let's say you're in that situation where you've got some shaft lean and you're able to hit good shots. And let's say you're kind of like this, where you have some shaft lean at contact, right? Well, when you hit a power fade, it might be more like that, where you just have a little bit more, right? But that's a difficult thing for a lot of people. So what I recommend doing is just learn how to draw and fade the ball normally. And then once you kind of get to where you can move the ball around, then it can be, okay, I'm going to work on getting a little bit more shaft lean and doing that. But you don't have to do that, by the way. You can just hit your fade a little bit higher and a little bit weaker. This is a big reason why I predominantly hit draws and why I generally recommend most golfers hit a draw. And the reason is that it's a more powerful ball flight. You're going to hit the ball generally farther when you hit a draw. And the reason being is that, because it's the opposite effect, right? So when you hit a fade, you're opening the face to the path, which adds more loft and makes the shot a little bit weaker. Well, with a draw, you're closing the face to the path. When you close the face, it actually de-lofts the face. And now you are hitting a little bit stronger of a shot. So that's why I generally recommend draws, because the ball flight's typically a little bit more manageable. It's more powerful. You can hit the ball farther. And when you hit the ball farther, it's just a lot easier to play golf. So especially with irons, I would definitely recommend a draw. If you want to fade your driver a little bit, that you're typically not going to lose a ton of distance with the driver. Not very much going draw to fade necessarily. But with an iron, you can definitely lose some distance there. So that's why I generally recommend that, because it's going to be a stronger ball flight. Situations where I would say maybe a draw isn't for you is just that if you got that fade and you are really good with that fade, you got control of it, and you're very consistent with it. I played with lots of folks who are very, very good at controlling the fade. Pretty much the same amount of curve every single time, and do really, really well. So it's totally fine to do that if you want as well. All right, let's keep going here. So Daryl K says, Q, can you instruct me on grip and grip pressure? I feel that my fingers do not remain on the club shaft throughout my swing. I've tried different grip sizes, and it seems to happen with any grip. Maybe I'm holding the club incorrectly. Please offer thoughts. Thanks. Yeah, no problem. So let's talk about the grip, then we'll talk about grip pressure, and then we'll talk about what is most likely happening that is making you lose grip of the club, or what I typically see. So with the grip, the way I would kind of look at it, I don't know if I have, I don't. So the way I would look at it is we have these creases between our fingers and the palm of our hand, right? So right there, you got that crease where the fingers kind of meet the palm of your hand. So what I want you to focus on is the crease on the pointer finger and the crease on the pinky finger. The way you're going to put this club through your hand is that the club, the shaft here, the grip is going to go through below that crease of the pointer and above the crease of the pinky, just like that. So now I can wrap my hands around that, and that's how I want my lead hand to go on there. And this is whether you have a strong, weak, or neutral grip. So with a weak grip, it's going to be more on the side like that. If I have a stronger grip, it's going to be the same thing, right? It's just going to be more on top of the club. So this would be like a strong grip, all right? So that's how that goes on there. Now, we don't want to have it too much in the fingers, because then we end up with something called a long thumb. And this could be a little bit of what's happening. This could possibly be what's happening if you don't have a secure grip. But it creates all these gaps and insecurity, right? So if I have this long thumb, then this club kind of wants to go like that. It's not very secure in my hands, right? And I don't want to have it too much in my hands, because again, I'm going to have some gapping here where I'm not really getting good coverage on the grip. And then also it's going to be hard for me to hinge this club to be able to create much lag, get the club to lag very much. So those are the things we want to look out for. So that's why we want to have it a little bit in the fingers, a little bit in the hand, like that. And then the trail hand on our trail hand is on any hand, but with the trail hand, you got the meaty parts of your hand. You got the heel pad and the thumb pad here, right? If you squeeze those together, that creates a crease. You want to put that crease basically on top of the thumb of your lead hand, or a little bit on the side. Generally, if I would say if you have trouble getting the club face closed, you tend to leave the face open. More on the side is better. It's going to be easier for you to get that face closed. And if you tend to hook the ball, get the face too close, then you might want to have it more on top, right? So what that would look like is that would be kind of more on top like this. So if you kind of look here, try to get a little bit closer so you can see. And then this would be a little bit more on the side, right? So you see that's on the side and that's on top. So that would be kind of depending on what your miss is. So that's how I would hold on to the club. So now let's talk about grip pressure. So we need to put pressure into the grip. If you may have heard the term hold the club like a baby bird, or like a tube of toothpaste without squeezing the toothpaste out and things like that. You can't really do that, because if you literally did that, the club would come flying out of your hands. We have to put some force into the handle. In fact, the amount of speed that you can generate is directly related to how much force you can put into the handle. So think about it this way. If we took this grip off and it was just a bare, shaft here, and then we covered it in Vaseline, how fast do you think you're going to swing that club? Not very fast, because there's a force acting outward that is wanting to pull the club out of your hands. And if you don't have the ability to apply force and have the friction, it's just going to come flying out of your hands. So that's why we need to put force into the grip. So the way I would kind of think about the grip pressure is you're putting basically as little as you need to throughout the swing. I know that might seem obvious, but basically, like at address, so if you think about it this way, like at address, I don't need to have a really firm grip. Nothing's happening. I can have really, really soft. I can hold the club like a baby bird at this point in the swing. As soon as some motion starts, there's going to be some force acting out away from you that's wanting to pull the club out of your hands. So we have to apply a little bit more pressure. And I find that it's fairly intuitive, the amount of pressure that you're putting into, because really you're putting enough pressure into the handle to not let the club fly your hands. That's essentially what you need to do. You just need to apply enough pressure into the handle to not allow it to fly out of your hands. The more speed you start throwing with the club, the more force you got to put it into the handle. So through impact, I got to be putting a lot of force into the handle, especially with this lead hand, because otherwise it's going to come flying out of my hands. So, you can think of at address, it's like a 2 out of 10. And then as I continue, I'm at 3, 4, 5, I'm picking up speed, and I'm more like a 10 out of 10 at impact, right? So really what it comes down to is you don't want to have a gorilla grip on the club. You don't want to be pushing as much force into the handle at all times. You put as little into the grip as you have to throughout the swing, but you still want to create speed. So you don't want to hold it really, really softly, because if you really hold it softly, then you're not going to swing it with very much speed, because the club's going to come flying out of your hands. So swing the club with speed and put the amount of force into the handle that is necessary to keep the club from flying out of your hands. That's really what it comes down to. And I have found that is pretty much intuitive with all golfers. So that's what I would stick to. Now, more than likely, the reason why the club comes out of your hands is probably because you're really flaring out your arm, your trail elbow, or something like that. So typically, if I were to go like that, see how this club wants to pull out of my left hand, because my left wrist doesn't want to go like that, right? It doesn't want to. So when your right hand very easily, your trail hand very easily does that. So I find that this happens with a lot of golfers who don't have like a good turn and are trying to lengthen the swing by virtue of going like this, right? Because it's hard to say, Daryl, without seeing your swing, but this is just what I typically see, and I would look at your swing to kind of see if that's what's happening. If you're going up to the top of the swing, and with your trail hand here, you're really flattening this out and pushing the club and really kind of getting the club across the line and going like this, you can see how that pulls the club out of my hand, right? Whereas you probably need to be more like this, and now you're going to have the club more secure, and you're going to have the club in a much, much better position. That's what I would venture to guess is going on. If that is what's going on, The ball between the elbow drill is pretty good. Now, this keeps the elbow from flaring out a lot. It doesn't necessarily stop the wrists from doing that. You may need to maybe use a different training aid to kind of make sure that the wrists aren't doing that. There's lots of training aids that to keep your lead wrist flat or something like that. But ball between the elbows, maybe something to keep the lead wrist flat and really getting used to kind of a position like this. Now, you don't have to use these things. They're training aids, right? They're things to help you to give you some feedback. You can just try to keep your elbows closer together and keep a nice flat lead wrist. And then the trail wrist kind of feel like you're a waiter with a tray at the top and you're not going like that, right? Because if you go like that, that's going to try to pull the club out of your lead hand, which we don't want. We want to keep a nice, good grip on there. And then that's going to allow you to be in a good position. So yeah, make sure that you're kind of able to go up to the top of the swing and kind of let that club, you want to feel that club kind of sitting in your hand there. That's going to allow you to have good control of it. So that's what I would kind of look at. You might have a transition that's really, really quick. That'd be another thing. If you're really quick and jerky in your transition, that can throw the momentum, because the momentum of the club is probably going in a direction that's pulling the club out of your hands. That's typically what's happening there. So if that's what's happening, then feel like the club is moving very slow at the top of the swing, and almost like the club comes to a standstill, almost like a pause, and then come down. You know, that could be something you can try to get you in a better position. If you'd like to, send me videos of your swing, we can work together to kind of figure things out, get you on the right track. I do offer online lessons. You can click the link above the video here if you're interested in that. But those would be the things that I'd be looking at if you're struggling with what you're talking about. All righty, let's keep going here. All right, so Steve says, with back to target on good backswing, are shoulders flat or tilted? Tilted for sure. If they're flat, that means that you're standing up out of your posture quite a bit, right? So in order for my shoulders to get flat at the top of the swing, and as I'm coming out, you can see how I have to really stand up. I want to keep my shoulders kind of tilted down. So a good feel that you want to have with the shoulders, and this is actually from Ben Hogan's 5 Lessons book. Basically, what we want, and he talked about this in that book, is he talked about the plane of glass. And really what we want to imagine is that there's a plane of glass that goes from the ball to the top of your shoulders. And your shoulders remain on that plane throughout the entire swing. Now, keep in mind, this is an exaggeration. It's not literally what's happening. Your shoulders are not tilted down that much. But I think for a lot of people, this is a really good feel, because most people do what you're talking about. Or I shouldn't say most people, a lot of folks do what you're talking about, where the shoulders get really flat at the top, and now we have to kind of drop down in the downswing, or we stay really tall and we release the club early, too early, and things like that. So we want to keep those shoulders nice and tilted down. So I think that's a good visual, is to imagine like there's a plane right here that goes straight down to the ball, and I'm rotating my shoulders on that plane. Now, they're not technically going to be that steep, like I said, but it can be a great feel. So, yes, you definitely want to have your shoulders tilted throughout the swing. Basically, the only time that the shoulders lose their tilt, where they're not tilted downward, is when you come all the way around into the full finish, where your lead shoulder is typically going to be, your trail shoulder is typically going to be higher than your lead shoulder in that finish position. That's when the shoulders can kind of level out or come close to leveling out. Other than that, they're going to stay kind of on that plane, that I talked about. All right, we got 25 minutes or so left here. If we got any more questions. If not, no big deal at all. Let's see here. All right, so I got a question here. It says, what is the most overlooked skill in golf? I think this is a pretty easy one for me, and that is center face contact. Most golfers do not train this at all. I used to be one of them. But once I started training it quite a bit, my game just started getting a lot better. And there's actually been some recent research, I believe it was by Ping, where they tested golfers of all handicaps. And they actually showed kind of the strike dispersion between a 20 handicap, a 10 handicap, a scratch, and a professional golfer. And if you look at like a 20 handicap golfer, the dispersion on the face is like 3 inches wide, right? And we're saying dispersion. I'm talking about like if they were to hit, let's say they were to hit 50 shots, and you could see where every little strike is, like that dispersion's kind of be in that area. Then you go to like a 10 handicap, and it's like half that. It's like 1.5 inches wide, the dispersion. Now, keep in mind they probably throw out some of the worst ones that cut off a lot of the worst and a lot of the best, and they just have the ones that are kind of the main ones. And then you have scratch, where scratch is pretty much in the middle of the face. Like you could have a dime, probably over where their dispersion is. And the pros were pretty much the same, maybe just a little bit tighter than the scratch. So that's showing a pretty high correlation to handicap to the ability to hit the ball in the middle of the face. Yet a lot of people don't train it. And I've actually found through teaching that a lot of people have no idea where they're hitting the ball on the club face. And if you're very, very inconsistent, right, meaning your ball flight is all over the place, you can hook it, you can slice it, you can pull it, you can push it, you can do everything. Odds are you're probably not hitting the ball in the middle of the face very often, because when you don't hit the ball in the middle of the face, this is why it's the most overlooked, and it's also one of the most important skills that you really need to be able to do, because it has an effect on both your ball flight, so your accuracy, and your distance. So obviously, if you don't hit the ball in the middle of the face, you're going to lose distance, right? Because what happens is the face twists, right? So if you hit the ball in the heel, the face will twist closed. If you hit the ball in the toe, the face will twist open. And when the face twists, it's not going to transfer as much energy to the golf ball, and it's just not going to go as far. And that's usually all people think about when it comes to mishitting the ball, is that it's just not going to go as far. But that's not it. It really has a large influence on your ball flight as well. Typically, when you see a pro hit a very errant tee shot, where they hit a big slice or a big hook, it's usually because of a poor strike on the face. Now, obviously, pros are going to tend to hit the middle of the face very frequently, but they're not perfect. They're human too. They don't hit the middle of the face every single time, and a lot of times those errant drives are from that. How it affects accuracy is when I hit the ball in the toe, the face will twist open, which for a right-handed golfer would be opposite for a left-handed golfer. But for a right-handed golfer, that's going to make that ball start more to the right than it normally would. Doesn't mean the ball's going to start to the right, just means it will start more to the right than it normally would. Then the ball will tend to draw more or fade less due to something called gear effect. So if you generally draw the ball and then you hit your drive off the toe, that could turn that draw into a hook, right? And then let's say you generally draw the ball and hit the ball off the heel, it might turn it into kind of a weak but straighter kind of shot, right? Which, if you're trying to hit a draw, that may not be ideal. And it really depends on the severity of how far off center you were, and then also how much draw you tend to put on it, or whatever curve it is. But it typically depends on that. So that's why it's really important to hit the ball in the middle of the face. I know that may seem obvious to a lot of people, but like I said, in working with a lot of golfers have no idea where they're hitting the ball in the face, and they don't train it either. So definitely very, very important to train it to get to where it's second nature, because like I said, you're going to hit the ball so much more consistently if you hit the ball in the middle of the face. And then also, if you hit the ball in the middle of the face, when it's so much easier to assess what the problem is when you see the ball flight, right? Because when you don't hit the ball in the middle of the face, as I talked about with the toe strike, right? It changes the ball flight, and you really don't really know what the problem might have been outside of an off-center strike. But if you hit the ball in the middle of the face, you can look at the ball flight and you can know, hey, my face was too open, it's too closed, my path was too much into out, it's too much out to in, and all that stuff. You can know that stuff very, very quickly. So that's why it's important to do that. So let's talk about one technical thing that I would recommend that you do, and then a way to develop the skill. So the most important technical piece for hitting the ball in the middle of the face is the stable and fluid spine. And this is the first piece of the Tuskegee system. And Clay calls this the #1 key to consistency for a reason. So what the stable and fluid spine is, we want to have some spine angle away from the target here at address. And then when we start the swing, we want that angle to remain the same, and we don't want it to shift too far left or right. We want to remain pretty stable, pretty steady, right? So I'm going to be nice and angled away. I'm going to go to the top. I'm going to remain nice and angled away. If I go like this, that's going to tend to make me make some sort of compensation in the downswing. It's going to make it very difficult to hit the ball in the middle of the face, not amongst other things, right? If I go up to the top of the swing, I'm kind of like this, again, I'm moving my body way off the ball, makes it very, very difficult to hit the ball in the middle of the face. So I want to remain nice and angled away. I'm going to shift to my trail side, go up to the top. I'm going to remain nice and angled away. And then when I come into contact, I'm going to get a little bit more angled away as I come into contact, as my body and spine kind of translate forward a little bit. So it's not excessive movement moving around everywhere. So if your stable and fluid spine is way off, and you are struggling with hitting the ball in the middle of the face, then I definitely recommend that you work on the stable fluid spine course, because it's going to help you hit the ball in the middle of the face more often, amongst other things. Now, a way that you can test hitting the ball in the where you're hitting the ball in the face is to use some foot powder spray. This stuff is awesome. It's Dr. Scholl's Odor X. I always recommend this because it's pretty much readily available to about anybody. If you go to your local pharmacy, there's a really good chance they're going to have this. And it's not very expensive. It's $5 or $6 a can, and it doesn't take much. Tips for using this, and this is the kind that I recommend, by the way, Dr. Scholl's Odor X blue and yellow can. Shake it up real good. I've had people use it, and they told me, like, oh, it just sprays on clear. Well, the reason why is because you didn't shake it up. So you got to shake it up, get the powder working around in there, and then don't use very much. It does not take much. Literally, this is all you need. It's like a 1-second spray. That's all you need. Right? Once you get that little coating on there, you'll be able to easily see where you strike on the face. You don't want to cake it on there for 2 reasons. One, if you cake it on there, you're going to go through this stuff pretty quick. And 2, if you cake it on there, it can mess with the spin of the ball. It can slip on the face and all that stuff. So if you put a really light coating, it's not going to mess with that, and it's going to last plenty of time for you. And you can buy a new can. So once you've done that, hit some balls, see where you're striking on the face to test that. So let's talk about a skill drill that you can do. First, what you want to do is you want to see if you have any sort of bias. Typically, if you've been playing golf for a long time, you're going to have a bias toward a certain part of the face. So hit 10 shots, use the foot powder spray, and see where you're hitting it on the face. Ideally, what you'd want to see is kind of a centered dispersion. I mean, ideally, you'd want to see every strike perfectly in the middle of the face. But unless you're a scratch golfer, that's probably not what you're going to see. But what you want to see is a dispersion that is fairly centered. So if you're hitting a little bit on the toe, a little bit on the heel, but your dispersion is fairly centered, you can move on to the next step. But if you find that you have a bias toward the heel side or the toe side of the club, you want to kind of fix that bias first to get your dispersion to be more centered. So the first step is to shift your dispersion to the center of the face. And then the second step is to shrink the dispersion. So let's say that you had a heel bias, meaning you hit the ball on the heel somewhat frequently. What I would do, I would go through this protocol. So what you're going to do is you're going to set up on the stick here, no golf ball. You're just going to set up here, get in your normal stance. And I want you to have the heel of the club touching the stick. And you're going to make a swing where you come down and you brush the ground on this side of the stick without hitting the stick. And you got to get 10 in a row. Once you get 10 in a row, now what you're going to do is you're going to take the ball and you're going to set up the ball in the middle of the face with the toe of the club just touching the stick. And now you need to get 10 in a row where you don't hit the stick, but you hit the ball. And that's going to ensure that you're getting the strike on the toe. And you need to call upon the feeling that you had when you were just doing this. So you're going to call upon that same feeling and do the same thing here. Again, you're going to get 10 in a row. And you can't hit the stick. And you have to set up with the ball in the middle of the face. The reason why is if you set up the ball in the middle of the face and you set up with the stick touching the toe of the club, if you hit the ball and you don't touch the stick, that means that you hit it on the toe. And that's what we're trying to do. So the way that you get rid of a bias, such as a heel bias, is getting good at hitting it on the toe. And that first part where we set up like this with no ball and swung and brushed the turf to the inside, that is to show that you can definitely move the club closer to you and be able to hit the ball on the toe. It's kind of extreme, but if you imagine, let's say that the golf ball was there. Well, if you literally did that, you're coming in swinging and missing the ball from the inside. So that's what that's all about. So I'm going to get 10 again. I'm going to get 10 in a row. Now keep in mind, if you're hitting these balls at the range or something like that, the ball flight on these shots is not likely going to be good. It's not going to feel good. The ball flight's not likely going to be good. That's not the expectation. That's not the goal. The goal is to get as many strikes on the toe as you can. So don't be worried about the ball flight in the shots feeling bad. That's not the goal. The goal is to move the strike toward the basically get to where we can hit off the toe easily. Once we can get 10 in a row doing that, then I'm going to get the stick out of here. I'm going to get the foot power spray. I'm going to spray it on there. And now I have to get 10 in a row off the toe, where the center of the strike has to be on the toe side of the club, where I don't have the stick to help me, right? I don't have that stick as a visual cue. I just have to have that ball down there, and I got to hit the ball off the toe. Once I can get 10 in a row doing that, now I'm ready to keep working on shrinking my dispersion, because that's the first step in moving your dispersion to the center of the face, is by working on your bias. Now, you may need to do this quite a bit. Going through that process one time may not do the trick. So whenever you go to work on it, hit 10 shots, see where you're hitting on the face. If there is a bias in any direction, you work on it in that way. You can do the same thing with the toe strike. You just do the opposite, right? So once you've kind of gone through that, you've got the 10 in a row, 10 in a row, 10 in a row. Now you're ready to work on some drills to help you to shrink that dispersion. So what you want to do is what's called interleaving practice. This is basically where we do something different on every single rep. So for this drill, and again, when you're doing this drill, a lot of the shots are not going to be good. That's not the goal of what we're doing. The goal of what we're doing is to train shrinking the dispersion. And the way that we do that is by hitting it off of different parts of the face. So for this drill, what you're going to do is you're going to line up to the ball every single time with the ball in the middle of the face. And you're going to use a concept that is called win, pass, lose, stay. What that means is if you are successful, meaning that you win, then you pass and you go on to the next task. If you're unsuccessful, meaning you lose, then you have to repeat the task. You want to make an adjustment and you want to repeat the task. You don't want to do the same thing over and over and expect a different result. It's kind of like Einstein's definition of insanity, right? You have to make some sort of an adjustment. So you're going to have 3 tasks with this drill. The first task, you always start with the center face strike. The first task is a center face strike. The second task, it can be either a heel or a toe strike, but you have to pre-declare what it is. And then the third task is going to be whatever you didn't do of the heel and toe on the second task. All right. So I'm just going to kind of go through as if I'm doing this drill. So let's say, and when you're doing this as well, you use a foot power spray and you split the club face initially here into 3 equal sections. 3 equal sections. And the center of that strike has to be in that section in order for it to count. So let's say I go for the center strike. The first one's on the toe, right? So now I'm going to make an adjustment. I might feel, maybe I felt something in the swing there that maybe felt like it could have led to a toe strike. and now I'm going to make some rehearsals where I'm not doing that. Or maybe that shot felt like, man, that really felt like I hit it in the middle of the face, but obviously it's off the toe. Then you may need to adjust your feel. You may need to actually feel like you're hitting the ball off the heel to get the strike in the middle of the face. So let's say I go again, and I overdid it. I got it in the heel. So now I need to attempt it again, and then